Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Amanda Sulicz, and I'm going to present to you on how to publish your science, an editor's guide on writing a manuscript that engages readers. So first, a little about myself. My name, again, is Amanda Sulicz, and I received my PhD in chemistry in 2017. I focused on the synthesis of small molecule gold and iridium compounds, and I studied their photophysical properties. I then moved on to a postdoctoral fellowship where I worked for 2 years, still in chemistry, and I worked to expand my research interests a little bit to include the synthesis of organometallic oligomers and polymers, mainly focusing on that of platinum, and how those can be incorporated as dopants in OLEDs. And then I moved on to my current role at AIP Publishing, where I've been the last 2 years. I work as an associate editor on 3 of our journal titles: Applied Physics Reviews, Biophysics Reviews, and Chemical Physics Reviews. Applied Physics Reviews, or APR, is one of our flagship journal titles at AIP Publishing, and our most recent impact factor was just over 17. Biophysics Reviews and Chemical Physics Reviews were launched at the beginning of last year, and they both published their first issues in December of 2020. All 3 of the titles publish comprehensive reviews and original research articles. But let's focus on why you're here today. So 3 main questions that we're going to address during this presentation are: what is the purpose of a scientific paper? What is the structure of a good paper? And ways that you can make your paper more accessible to a broad audience. Let's first focus on the first question, the purpose of a scientific paper. So the purpose of a scientific paper stems from the fact that they're critical to the evolution of modern science. They allow scientists to build upon the work of others. There's two main types of scientific papers, and each of them has their own unique purpose. The first is to share your own original research with other scientists, or to review the research conducted by others. And in both of these situations, without effective communication, scientific papers become inaccessible and lose their purpose. So what are ways that we can make our scientific paper more accessible? Most importantly, you want to be able to communicate effectively. And to achieve this, your paper should be informative, clear, accurate, and concise. And these are 4 items which you'll see repeated throughout this presentation. And I'd like to reiterate that great results without effective communication can make your paper go unnoticed. Editors may reject a paper, and if it does get published, your readers won't cite it. So what are ways that you can effectively communicate the message of your paper? So first, your paper is broken up from the information that you collected, that you worked hard on getting in lab, or the what of your paper. You then interpret that information into your message, or what we like to say is the so what, and that message then turns into an action, which we like to consider the now what. But most importantly, you want to be able to effectively communicate your message, because this is the key element in an impactful paper. So effective communication is still getting your message across, and you want to be able to get your audience to understand, pay attention, and act upon the message. And let's talk about the 2 main audiences that your scientific paper will see. Each paper has 2 primary audiences: specialists, which are experts in the field, and they're a type of audience that requires relevant content, or the what, and the technical details to be able to validate your paper's conclusions. It's also comprised of non-specialists, and specialist referees are people that belong to this group, and non-specialists, which are people who require more context, or the so what of your paper, to be able to understand it. And to be understood by this audience, a paper needs to have a strong motivation, in-depth background, and comprehensive interpretation. And the reason this is so important is because editors, or people like me, are the people who belong to this group. So let's recap. The purpose of a scientific paper is one that gets the message across and conveys the so what. An audience needs to understand why your work is relevant and important. Let's move on to our next question, the structure of a good paper. Ernest Hemingway once said that prose is architecture and not interior decoration. And what we mean by that is that scientific papers follow a very specific structure, or the IMRAD structure, which is broken into the introduction, materials and methods, results, and discussion. And there's also your audience will be more interested in different areas than what you as the author are interested in. An author's interest usually lies in the results and discussion and the information included in the appendices. Because again, this is the stuff that you worked hard to collect in lab, or that information, or the what, which is a little different than the reader's interests, which primarily focus on the introduction and the conclusion, which are two things which first are summarized in the abstract. So let's talk about ways that you can make an effective abstract. The goal of an abstract is a global paragraph that will prepare your reader for the rest of your scientific paper. It's written with all audiences in mind, so both the specialist and non-specialists. And it allows a reader to decide if a paper is of interest in them, and can be broken up into two areas, a forward and a summary. And a good abstract, most importantly, outlines the chronological structure of your paper and puts what interests the readers up front. We can think of the introduction and the conclusion, the two main areas that readers are interested in, as the introduction can be considered the forward and the conclusion can be considered the summary in each abstract. We can further break this forward and summary into even more detailed parts. A forward can be broken into the context, which is what readers need to know to understand the need, which is what motivates the audience by detailing the knowledge gap the paper fills, the task, what you as the author did to address the need, and the object, what the paper does or contains, and what the reader should do with it. The summary can further be broken into three parts: the findings, what you as the author found as a result of executing the task, the conclusions, what the findings should mean to the reader, and the perspectives, what needs to be done in the future. We can look at this even more simplistically and think of the forward as the do I care, and the summary, the do I need more. The forward, or the do I care, is important because it can be attractive to non-specialists that will read, and also allows for experts in other fields to potentially cite your paper. A summary, or the do I need more, is a way for you to structure your abstract to attract those non-specialist readers. Ways that are also important to provide a summary of your paper and attract interest of both specialists and non-specialists is to provide detail of your paper. To be accessible, your paper must communicate effectively, and more importantly, to be impactful, a title must communicate effectively. And this is a way that you can also make your paper more easily discoverable. To do that, to make your title more accessible, it must be informative, it must state what's been shown, the so what, not just what's been done, or the what. It must be clear, which makes it simple enough to be understood by non-specialists, accurate, contain enough details to be understood by specialists, as well as concise, around 100 characters. So now that we've learned what the structure of a good paper is, one that's not written chronologically, you've told your readers up front the main outcome of the paper, and we've talked about ways to structure your abstract and title for effective communication. And now let's focus on the third part, which is way that you can make your paper accessible to a broader audience. And we can do that by focusing on things that the readers usually check, such as the title, abstract, and figures. And now let's look at some more specific examples of ways that we can improve each of these items. So this is a real life title example from my boss, Luigi Longobardi, who's the executive editor at AIP Publishing. This was a title of one of his first scientific papers that he ever published: RF squid-based devices for MQC. And remembering that we want a title to be informative, clear, accurate, and concise, we can see that this title is not informative. It did not state what has been done or what has been shown. It isn't clear. A non-specialist cannot understand it. It's not accurate. There's not enough detail to be understood by a specialist. It is, however, very concise. So let's think of some ways that we can fix the title of this paper. As we can see, it has some very technical terms in here. Technical terms are okay for both specialists and non-specialists, but acronyms make it difficult to be understood by a broad audience, and they're generally only understood by a small circle. So let's avoid them. So let's first define what each of these acronyms stands for. An RF squid is a type of superconducting quantum interference device, which is a type of Josephson junction device. It's in its most simplest form, an RF squid is a superconductive loop which is interrupted by a Josephson junction. So we know that an RF squid is a Josephson device. We can then modify this title to be called Josephson Devices for MQC. We're still left, however, with one more acronym, MQC. MQC stands for macroscopic quantum coherence. Even specialists can have a hard time understanding what this means. MQC is a type of scientific jargon and should be avoided as it only applies to a very specific set of specialists. We can further now make this title to expand on what has been shown by saying a Josephson devices for tests of macroscopic quantum coherence. By changing the title to this, we've made it slightly more informative by showing what was done, but it still doesn't show what was, title still does not describe what was shown, so we'll just give it a gray check mark for now. It's still not very clear, a non-specialist cannot understand it. It is, however, more accurate. It has enough detail to be understood by a specialist, and it still is remaining concise. We can fix this even further. So right now we have Josephson devices for tests of macroscopic quantum coherence. This title is informative and easier to discover than things like a search engine. We could be happy with this, but it still is not conveying the message or the so what of the paper. And this is something that's important, again, for non-specialists in a field to understand, and this is why you want to be able to bring each of your readers in. So let's focus on what was done and why it was done. So if you were to read the full paper, you would see that what the authors did was they designed different device configurations. Why it was done is because macroscopic quantum coherence is highly sensitive to thermal, current, and magnetic fluctuations. And in the paper, it was discovered that optimal design can minimize the effect of each of these fluctuations. We can use this now to define the so what by saying the optimal design can minimize the effect of these fluctuations. So let's change this title now to Design Optimization Improves the Noise Response in Josephson Devices for Tests of Macroscopic Quantum Coherence. By making these adjustments, we've now made this title more informative. It states what has been done and shown. It's clear and non-specialists can understand it. It's accurate. It's still understood by specialists, and it's still concise. Now that we've just figured out how to make a more effectively communicating title, let's think about ways that we can improve an abstract. So from before, let's remember that an abstract is a mini version of a paper. It provides just enough context and details so that the reader understands what has been done, why it was done, and how it was done. And an abstract is used by readers to decide whether or not they want to read the rest of the paper. It's used by authors because you want your work to be picked up and disseminated, and it's also used by potential referees to decide whether or not they would like to review a paper. So here's a general way that we can break up a paper, or an abstract in a paper, but I have an example that we can focus more specifically on. But remember, each forward contains 4 main parts: the context, need, task, and object, as well as the summary, which is broken into the findings, conclusion, and perspective. So remember the RF squid paper we just worked hard to fix the title of? Here was the old abstract of this paper. We present different types of integrated planar square devices in view of macroscopic quantum coherence MQC experiments. These devices include an RF squid probe to test the MQC coupled to a readout system based on DC squid sensor. Both DC squid and flux transformer are in a gradiometric configuration to minimize the electromagnetic noise from environment. We report on DC squid performances as well as preliminary results on the decay from the metastable flux for RF squid-based devices at the crossover temperature or classical limit. Right now, this abstract only is reporting the task and the findings of the paper. So right now, this is not an impactful abstract as it's missing a lot of the key components. As Luigi likes to say, it was a self-centered abstract that focused on what was interesting to him as the author and not what is interesting to the readers. It does not provide context, it did not explain the need for the research, and it left out the main conclusions. It did not tell the readers why the paper was important. So let's fix this now. We can break this now further into the bullets defined for the forward as well as the summary. We can make the context more specific to say a quantum computer requires quantum bits or qubits with good coherence that can be coupled together to form logic gates. Quantum computing based on Josephson junction technology is considered promising due to its scalable architecture. We can address the need. Decoherence due to noise is a major obstacle. The task. What was done? We developed different types of integrated Josephson devices where the qubit is an RF squid and the readout is performed by a DC squid magnetometer. The object. Here, we outline details on the design and fabrication of the device in two different geometries. We can then further elaborate on the summary of the abstract and report the findings. We report data on the device performances as well as preliminary results on the decay from the excited qubit state. The data show evidence that gradiometric configuration minimizes the effects of electromagnetic noise. It can also improve the conclusion and perspective to say these results show that optimal design can improve the response to external noise, and qubits based on Josephson technology are an encouraging first step towards demonstrating quantum coherence. This abstract is much more informative to both reader and author, as well as specialists and non-specialists in the field. One additional way we can improve a paper is to work on figures. In addition to the title and abstract, figures are often checked first by readers. In an effective paper, your figure will tell a story. And when you create the figures, remember, figures also are tools you can use to help get your message across, and you can use the captions to reiterate important information so that the readers do not have to dig through long text to figure out what message the figure is trying to convey. This is an example of a figure that was published in an AIP Advances article a few years ago. The current description of the figure is just measurement setup. Right now, we don't have any idea what this is trying to show us without reading the full paper. So your caption needs to have a message. So we can expand on this to say that experiments were performed at a temperature of 20 millikelvin, which is highlighted here, in an Oxford cryogen-free solution refrigerator. The microwave signal near the resonance frequency, of the microwave resonator is applied to the device through coaxial lines. The cryogenic attenuator is mounted to the input channel, and the microwave circulators in the output channel are used to reduce the thermal noise. We then also know that a laser beam is used to modulate the resonance frequency, and an output signal from the device is demodulated by a mixer and read by a spectrum analyzer. This is a lot more informative and can stand alone to help readers understand what the message your figure is trying to convey. So let's recap that ways that you can make your paper more accessible to a broad audience is focusing on the areas that are most important to the readers. You can focus on the title and abstract and also help to ensure that your figure captions contain a message. Let's recap the three main questions that we answer today. What is the purpose of a scientific paper? Your paper must get the message across. It conveys the so what. The audience needs to understand why the work is relevant and important. What is the structure of a good paper? Do not write your paper chronologically. Tell your readers upfront what the main outcome of your paper was. Structure the title and abstract for effective communication. My boss Luigi likes to compare the way some papers are written when they're written chronologically to a murder mystery novel. You don't want to find out that who the killer is in the very end. You should be told up front in the abstract what the main outcome is. And the last question, how do I make my paper accessible to a broader audience? Focus on the areas that are most important to the readers, improve your title and abstract, and ensure that your figure captions contain a message. So in conclusion, we have 3 answers to 3 questions which can help improve your approach to writing papers. If you communicate effectively and ensure your paper is accessible to non-specialists, your paper is more likely to be understood by the editors, who are the ones who will send it out to referees, and by the experts in other fields, the people who will cite it. And you can use what you've learned today to help write better, more impactful papers. And I have time to answer some questions now, but if you think of anything later, please feel free to contact me at my email address, asulicz@aip.org, or you can also find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @AmandaSulicz. And with that, please, we'll exit this, I guess, and take any questions.